Hey, folks, welcome to the Battles of the First World War podcast. This episode is a real milestone for the podcast, and I am at the same time embarrassed that I have not made it happen sooner. It is a milestone because today we have our first German historian joining us on the podcast. Joining us today is Mr. Alfons Philippi, an independent historian who has written a German language history of the Meuse-Argonne Offensive for a German audience titled Die Vergessene Schlacht, the Forgotten Battle. Alfons reached out to me to join the 2026 Lost Battalion Tours tour after he read a short article I wrote for the Doughboy Foundation's newsletter. We exchanged a few emails, and here we are, recording a podcast. Alfons has a personal connection to the Meuse-Argonne, and indeed, his family history is deeply intertwined with Germany's 20th century history. I'm excited to have Alfons come on the show, and so let's get right into it. Again, Alfons, thank you so very much for taking time out of your evening in Germany to come on the podcast.
It's a pleasure for me. Thank you, Mike.
All right, we'll get right into the questions. Can you tell us a bit about yourself and your background, and how did you become interested in the First World War?
Well, I was born in 1955, so I'm 70 now. My family has had a long tradition of farming history. So in this village where I still live today, they've been living for about 200 years.
Amazing.
And I'm the first one to go to university in the family line because in the past it was customary for sons of a farmer to become farmers again.
Correct.
So I graduated from school. I did my national service, then I went to university where I read English and history. Both had been my favorite subjects at school. I loved them, so I just wanted to continue those subjects. And then I became a teacher, and I worked at, as the British say, at the chalk face for over 40 years, and I retired a couple of years ago. So, what is my relationship with military history? It's I put it down to the fact that as long as I can remember, I had a keen interest in military history because my grandfather had been in the Great War, my father had been in the war. And in the village community where I grew up, virtually every man had been a veteran. They'd all been in the war at some theater of war, whether it was Northern Africa or Russia or France or Norway, wherever.
Right.
And also parts of a few of my teachers had been veterans in the Second World War.
Oh, wow.
My father had been a soldier from 1936, basically, until he returned from Russia in 1948, and he was one of the few survivors of the Battle of Stalingrad. So he became a Russian prisoner of war when the Sixth German Army surrendered, and he was one of the lucky few who returned after the war.
Right.
And I can remember, I still have childhood memories of my father taking me to the village cemetery, where people would commemorate the men who died in the war. And one of the moving elements was the village brass band then used to play a very sad tune. It's a song called in German, Ich hatte einen Kameraden, I had a comrade.
Yes.
And most men would then join the singing. And what was astonishing for me as a child, that quite a few men would break into tears because they had memories of comrades they'd lost in the war.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought to myself, there must be something that happened to these men which left a mark on these men for the rest of their lives.
Right.
And sometimes I could watch my father when he was sitting in the living room, and he was just brooding, and I could feel that that his thoughts were wandering back to what he had gone through.
Mm-hmm.
And there was one very sad moment when he got a phone call, and his best mate from war times had passed away, and he said, "Now my friend has passed away. I want to go too."
Oh.
and that was shocking for me because I said to him, "Well, I'm your son. I'm still there." I said,
Right.
"It's nothing to do with you. I'm the last one now of the old guard,
Hmm. Hmm.
the only surviving man of my unit."
Wow.
And that left an impression on me, and I became very much interested in history, and I thought there must be something that has changed these men so profoundly for the rest of their lives. And so I started studying whatever I could get into my hands about military history.
Wow. Gosh, what a powerful statement, like your father's statement. And folks, so Alphonse's father, was a uh, survivor of the Battle of Stalingrad. If you know your World War II history, that battle ended in early 1943, and his dad didn't come home until 1948, was it?
Yes, that's right. In the
So,
summer of 1948, he
so
returned.
5 years in Soviet captivity. 3 years after 3 years after the end of the war, right? And to my understanding, there were German prisoners coming home well into the 1950s, being
Yes, that's right.
released
The last 10,000 prisoners were released in 1955.
after the death of Stalin. Wow, Nikita
Yes, yes.
Khrushchev.
And the German chancellor traveled to Moscow and he negotiated with the Russians a new start in sort of political relations with Russia. And part of his deal was to bring these 10,000 men home.
Wow,
And
wow,
he became something like a saint for many Germans because he brought back their sons.
wow, wow. Amazing! Like what amazing stories! Like the depth of emotion, from what your father said. Like I can, I it's very shocking. Like me, if my father said that too, I would think I would reply the same way as you did.
Mm.
Like, hey, like, but we're here. Your family's still here. But I understand he has a deep, deep, deep connection to those men that, like,
Yes,
we probably can't grasp.
yes.
So you indicated your the village where you live, and that your family's
Mm.
probably been there for about 200 years. It's funny, like my family in Portugal is I think much the same. We've been there for for a couple of hundred years, and we were simple farmers too.
Yeah.
So you live in a region of Germany that is relatively close to France. So, like, how does this shape your perception of 20th century history? And is your perception from where you're located, is that different from, say, someone in like uh, Dunningen or Sachsen states?
I'm not quite sure, but I would think so because the region where we live had been the object of greed of French kings and Napoleon, and
Hmm.
so it had been fought over for centuries, basically.
Right.
So the people had along over generations they made the experience of invading armies, um, returning returning armies, and it was a permanent sort of tug of war between Germany and France over the region. And when Napoleon was the French had always had the aim to have the Rhine as a natural border between them and Germany.
I was just going to mention that. Yes. Yes. I was
And
just so surprised when I read that. Yes.
And when Napoleon was defeated, it was the English idea of having a balance of power in Europe to
Hmm.
prevent further war. So the French border had to be pushed back further west. So the area where we live now then became part of Prussia, of the
Hmm.
Kingdom of Prussia. It was the Rhineland province of Prussia then, and that was the prize that Prussia received for its contribution to Napoleon's downfall.
Understood. Okay.
So when my grandfather was then drafted, he became a soldier in the Prussian army. Although this is usually with Prussia, you associate the eastern parts of Germany,
Hmm.
but
Hmm.
Prussia extended over until virtually the French border,
Hmm. Correct.
and so I think the experience of permanent tensions and wars
Hmm.
has led to an attitude that people are really able to appreciate the value of peace and collaboration.
Okay.
I mean, in the Second World War, the First World War was fought on foreign soil only. People did not make any experience of an invading army destroying villages and towns.
Right. Right.
So what they saw in 1918, when the German army returned from the Western Front, was just marching columns of soldiers who apparently had not been defeated
Right.
because they returned in good order.
Hmm.
Ironically, my grandfather's division marched back just 2 miles from my grandfather's home.
Wow.
So it's just a strange coincidence.
Seriously,
And
yeah.
because the German army had to retreat across the River Rhine.
Hmm.
In World War II, it was a very different story
Right.
because the fighting was fierce. There was an enormous scale of destruction. All the villages had been affected to some degree or other. There were lots of destroyed farmhouses, destroyed public buildings.
Hmm.
Um, After the war, they found dead soldiers in the forests everywhere,
Everywhere. Right.
dead bodies that had to be recovered. So people then, I think, developed a general attitude of being able to appreciate peace and understanding. And also, the area was then seized by the French twice.
Okay.
After the Great War, part of it became a French-dominated part of Germany that was under the control of the League of Nations officially, but the
Right.
French had a right to exploit the coal mines as a compensation for the destruction of coal mines in northern France.
Okay.
And after the Second World War, the French again tried to seize this particular part of Germany by installing a sort of semi-independent state, which was controlled by the French government in Paris. It was closely linked with France. Economically, people were using French money.
Hmm.
But then again, there was a referendum, and people were asked to decide whether they wanted to be part of a state which was supposed to be, the heart of a future united Europe. The idea was to have a smaller state, which was supposed to be the core of a united European system.
Okay.
But people objected to this. People didn't want, because they thought, okay, well, it's again the French that want to take control over us. So let's return to Germany. And they were attracted by the economic miracle of Western Germany,
Okay. Okay.
because the economy of the Federal Republic was expanding it was exploded. It was booming,
Hmm.
and it was leaving French economy behind. And people wanted to sort of have their fair share of this economic miracle. So that dominated this decision to return to Germany. But nevertheless, the closeness to France is today, it's part of our daily life, because there are quite a lot of commuters who come from France to work in Germany. A lot of commuters go to Luxembourg from France, from Germany. So there's a lot of sort of exchange between people, and it has become perfectly normal just to cross the border into France without seeing border guards or police
Right.
officers. So for me, it's normal to get on my bike and just cross the border, and it's just traffic signs are different,
Yeah.
village names are different, but you feel like home.
Wow. Gosh, that's incredible. That's incredible. And it's so funny. Like, you're not funny, but I've already noticed just a different tone in our conversation here than with other guests that I've had on the podcast. Like, this is your approach to history is like one of the war is a very solemn, very, very heavy emotional event. And
Because I've noticed, I've seen what kind of
yeah.
marks these wars left on the men who returned.
Right, right. And then also, like, how you speak of, like, the people have, come to the conclusion that peace is so much better, which of course it is. I mean, like, thank God we're both in safe areas right now where we can have this conversation without any any fear of interruption or any violence or anything. And that's not just, I just want to say to the listeners, like, that's not to say that previous listeners are previous guests on the podcast are different. It's just interesting to hear a different approach. Like, of course, many of the guests that I've had on, they're from the winning side of World War One. They're British, they're American guests, Canadian guests. So I think we look at it differently. We even like have a different tone. So it's just notable. So that's such a fascinating insight into Germany.
I hope I'm not spoiling your podcast with that.
No, this is fantastic. I'm so glad you're here. I'm so glad you're here. I'm really, Alphonse, like I'm so glad you reached out with your email, and for like I said in the introduction, folks, Alphonse is actually going to join us out on the in the Meuse this summer, and it's going to be really, really amazing. And a friend of mine is working up a couple of surprises for you. So
Oh,
so it should be interesting. I'm thinking of the 2022 remake of Remarque's All Quiet on the Western Front, of which a friend of mine, same friend who's working up those surprises for you, he said that's a German war film, and it is made for Germans. So, I guess coming a little bit more narrow now, what is the German view of the First World War, and is it intertwined with the Second World War into like one large war experience, or is it still seen as a separate event?
If there is something like a collective or national memory of past events, I would say the First World War has been completely deleted by the Second World War.
Okay.
It's a forgotten war. That was one reason for me to call my book "The Forgotten Battle," because the scale of destruction of in World War II, the figures of the losses were much bigger, much higher than what people had experienced during the Great War.
Okay.
I mean, you might have seen aerial films of German cities after the Second World War.
Right.
And there were just fields of ruins. Germany was virtually bombed back into Stone Age conditions. And also, but people learned after the war. Millions of men came home. They were completely traumatized by their experiences. I've seen grown men crying when they were overwhelmed by their memories. And I met a man in my village here who had served in an armored division in Normandy.
Okay.
And he told me about a counterattack against the Americans at a fairly early stage. And he was overwhelmed by his memories, and he started crying. And then along with that, we have the overwhelming awareness of the Holocaust, that Germany had committed unspeakable atrocities. It's wrong to say Germany. Germans had, not all Germans had done this, but quite a few Germans had been involved in this.
Right.
And that created a feeling of collective guilt, along with an overwhelming wish to forget about the past. And the first few years after the war were just a struggle for survival, because there was no food, no fuel to heat homes. I did a bit of school history about the first few months after the war at the school where I worked, and there were monthly reports written by the head teacher to the French authorities.
Okay.
And he mentioned that children collapsed during lessons because they were starving. They walked to school for about an hour or two. They had no shoes. They walked to school with bare feet in the winter. Unspeakable conditions. There were no window panes in the school windows. So people they had no fuel to heat the school building. So it was horrifying.
Oh my God, they were
And
outside.
when the economic conditions became better, people then just wanted to forget. They wanted to enjoy themselves, to have fun.
Mhm.
And there was something that was called um, a wave of eating. People indulged in rich food.
Mhm.
People started traveling, and they wanted to just to enjoy the fruits of their labor and not be reminded of the past.
Okay.
And for that reason, World War One is just a forgotten incident, a forgotten chapter of German history. And sadly, because it is very, very important.
Right.
Because
Right.
without World War One, Hitler would never have occurred.
Correct. 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 So, as you've mentioned, you have a very personal connection to the First World War. Your grandfather served in 2nd Company, Infantry Regiment 152, 41st Division. Can you tell us a bit about him and his war experiences?
Yes, my grandfather was born in 1880. Then he married. He just had a sister, no brothers. So he married a girl from a neighboring village. They had 4 children. And when the war broke out, the war broke out in July, August 1914. He was drafted in February 1915.
Oh, okay.
I'm not sure whether he served before the war. I don't think so because he was the only son, and not every able-bodied man had to become a soldier, was drafted to the army, because the population was growing very, very quickly, and only about 40%, 50% of able-bodied men were drafted before the war.
Okay.
I think that the fact that he was drafted in February 1915 is an indication that the losses of the German army had become enormous. So they desperately needed more men. So for some reason, he was drafted. The physically demanding work on the farm was then done by a Russian prisoner of war who had been captured during the border battles in Eastern Germany and Prussia.
Right. Right.
And that
Tannenberg.
battle
Hmm.
most 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 likely. And then he served in Russia first. Then his division was transferred to Romania. And at the end of 1916, it was then transferred to the Western Front. First, they came to a so-called quiet spot on the Western Front to become accustomed to the different way of fighting on the Western Front. He had mentioned, that's quite interesting, that there had been cases of fraternization on Christmas between Russians and Germans, leaving the trenches and meeting in no man's land.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So he mentioned somebody put up a little Christmas tree on the parapet,
Hmm.
and the other side responded then by stopping to shoot, and then they exchanged goods in between, and then at some point somebody started shooting again, and they all had to hurry back to their trenches.
Sure.
So when they came to the Western Front, he went to places like Champagne. They fought on the Chemin des Dames. Then they fought in the big Passchendaele offensive against the British. They took part in the spring offensive of 1918, and then they were overrun by Canadians and Australians on the Black Day of the German Army in August 1918.
Okay.
Then they were hastily reorganized. They received some reinforcement, and then they were thrown back to the front to fight the Americans. And there he became a prisoner of war. And but he passed away when he was 12. When I was 12, sorry. Well, he was 67 then when he passed away. But I still have memories of him. He was a lean, tall man with a good sense of humor, And on one occasion, that's something that I'd never forgotten. I asked him as a child if he had killed somebody during the war,
Hmm.
and he didn't say anything. And then I noticed tears rolling down his cheeks. And later, my father told me that he had told them about his sons about an incident where he had killed a British officer, apparently in a shell hole or in hand to hand, in a hand to hand combat situation. And he searched the dead body, found a wallet with a picture of a family, and he had a lifelong sense of guilt about this. And apparently, he had seen some very serious fighting on the Western Front, and I suppose it was a moment of relief to be captured by the Americans, by Douglas MacArthur's division, because that was the end of this nightmare. Because the Allies were far superior. They were gaining the upper hand on the battlefield. Their tactics were getting better and better, and their superiority was enormous. And what he told me about the Americans was quite interesting. There were two things. He said the Americans were inexperienced soldiers, so when they moved across, when they were advancing, they moved rather clumsily, and they were presenting excellent targets for German machine gunners. And the other incident was about his time in an American camp when he was taken, after he had been taken prisoner. He said the food he received was excellent because they were obviously getting the same rations as American soldiers, and German soldiers had only been able to dream about food like that.
Right, right,
Because there had been a massive shortage of food on the German side. They were getting bread that was mixed with sawdust and turnips and stuff like that.
right.
Um, so for him it was a tremendous relief. He was released. He was repatriated in January 1919. And then he was
January
able to,
1919. So not so soon after the war. So he must.
yeah, very soon
Yeah.
after the war he was able to return.
Oh,
And I found a document of the Red Cross, um, with his name and a handwritten note, repatriated January 1919.
right, right. A friend of mine just just pointed out that the International Red Cross is a great
Mm.
resource for some First World War documents. Yeah. Speaking of the food, a friend of mine and I were discussing some American prisoners who were in Rastatt in Germany and in
Yes.
POW camp there. The YMCA and the International Red Cross helped bring supplies and food to those American soldiers to the
Hmm.
point that the German guards started complaining that like, hey, look, like I'm sitting here starving, and the Americans are literally playing with their food. And what he meant was that
Hmm.
the Americans had no baseballs or footballs, so they were taking cans of soup and they were throwing them to
Yeah.
each other like they were baseballs. And I don't know. I don't know if you've ever had a can of soup thrown at you, but boy, is there an incentive to catch it, if
Oh yes,
yeah.
definitely. Yes.
But yes,
You-
but I can understand those German guards are like, like what,
hmm.
come on now.
Yeah.
So yeah, those poor guys.
Probably those guards thought, "Hey, they are prisoners. How come they have better food than we have?"
Better food than me. Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, completely understandable. Um, Alphonse, since you regularly cross the border over to France to, gosh, that's just so amazing. How often do you visit the old battlefields, and what do these visits bring to you?
Well, I've been visiting battlefields basically since I went to university. There we I made some friends at university, and we decided to have a thorough visit of the Verdun battlefield. And so everybody had to prepare certain aspects of the Battle of Verdun. And we went there for a couple of days, and we had a very well. It was scientifically prepared. So an academic excursion of the battlefield of Verdun, and that was
Okay.
very, very impressive. And since then, I've also for motorbike trips, for day trips into France, I usually prepared them with a map.
Hmm.
And on the old type Michelin maps, you had they showed the cemeteries, and you could see French and German cemeteries.
Okay.
And when you drew a line between those cemeteries, you had the front line. And I
Right.
started visiting the cemeteries, and it is absolutely overwhelming to stand on a cemetery with thousands of crosses,
Hmm. Yes.
because there's a man underneath each cross. And it also has to do with lessons my father. He didn't talk about the war a lot, but he said that peace is the most valuable thing. You have to preserve peace by all means, and it's he said in the war wakes up the beast in human beings. In some of them, not all of them, but it releases evil instincts that are difficult to harness, and so that created some sort of a fascination for me. And for the Meuse-Argonne, I remember returning from a motorbike trip to France. I went to Champagne to see the battlefield where the French Revolutionary Army had stopped the Prussians in 1792,
Okay.
Valmy.
Valmy, yes.
There's a rebuilt windmill that became the symbol of the French victory. And on the way back, I chose a different route, and I came past a road signposting American Cemetery. And it was something like an inner voice that told me, "Oh, come on, let's have a. Still, the day is still long enough for a little detour. Let's go
Mhm.
there." And I came to Romagny-sur-Montfaucon, and that was overwhelming. That was an incredible impression. I mean, this is it's the biggest American cemetery in Europe,
Yes. Yes.
and it's so well kept. It's amazing. And you drive through little French villages, and then you enter a different world, basically.
Hmm.
And then I had these memories about my grandfather fighting against the Americans, and so I started reading about the Meuse-Argonne Offensive. And when my younger son left home he went to Frankfurt for a new job, and he suggested going on a boys' tour, his father and him. So we chose, we picked two battlefields where my grandfather had been. We went to the Chemin des Dames in France,
Okay.
and then we went to Amiens. There's a village, a little town there called Villers-Bretonneux.
Yes. Okay.
That's where the Australians built a memorial after the Great War, and this is very close to the place where my grandfather was in the first line when the tanks rolled over them, basically. And in this, there's an Australian memorial there. It's called the Sir John Monash Centre.
Hmm.
And they have a wonderful display of Australian history, of how the war shaped Australian national identity, and
Yes.
also some videos about the fighting in the area. And one of the videos, what was a computer generated a display, was filmed from the German point of view. And you could see German soldiers standing in the trenches and trying to fight against an armada of tanks rolling towards them. And suddenly my son said to me, "What's wrong with you? You are so pale." And I felt my knees shaking. It was as if I was standing next to my grandfather in the trench.
Yeah.
I had to sit down. It was the most amazing experience. And my thesis is that when you visit the battlefield where your ancestors fought, you are very, very close to them.
Yes.
So following that, I went to some other places in Flanders. I stood in a place where I think this was his position. Then I also went to the Côte de Châtillon, and I managed to find the place where he probably was most probably captured. And this is it's amazing. It's difficult to describe, but you feel very, very close.
Yeah.
It's a very emotional experience.
I've had, I can understand that. I don't have any ancestors who were in the war, but I had a similar experience. I actually put it in an episode about the poet Wilfred Owen.
Mhm.
Similar, like when I visited his grave. I mean, this was uh, I have been reading his poetry since I was a teenager, and suddenly in 2024, I was just an hour away from where he was buried. So I drove out there, and I felt a similar thing to like where I simply had to stand there for a while, and I was like, I
Mhm.
can't believe how close I am to him. He's right
Yeah,
here. I could
yeah,
like feel him, and the only time I've felt that sort of connection is visiting my father's grave. Like it's I know he's here.
yeah,
And I still when I go see my dad, it's like I can feel him. And
yeah,
so I
exactly.
yeah, I can
Yeah.
understand that. I can very much
And I
understand.
think it's important to visit battlefields and cemeteries because the men who fought there must not be forgotten because they gave their lives for a certain cause. The struggles they were involved in have lessons for us
Yes.
that we have to learn. And so it's might sound a bit pathetic, pompous, but the torch has to be kept burning. It has to be passed on to following generations.
Yes.
So we must keep visiting battlefields to keep the memory alive.
Yes. And to keep remembering how bloody awful the
Yes,
war is, and like this
yes,
this is the end. This is the end result. Like
yes,
in here there were doctors, farmers, auto mechanics, teachers, husbands, brothers.
yeah.
And all their lives cut short. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So your book, Die Vergessene Schlacht. Um, what motivated you? I mean, I think we have some inkling of your motivation, but what was what inspired you to undertake this project, and
Mm,
what was that like for you? What was your goal in writing this book? Obviously, it's in German for a German audience.
mm, mm. Well, it started with it all started with my research into family history, ancestry research. I knew from my father, from my memories, that my grandfather had been in the Great War, and I wanted to find out more. But that was the beginning of an extraordinary journey. um, it was I wrote to the history branch of the German army. They responded and told me that there are no documents available about this time because it was all the archives were burnt in an air raid in Potsdam in April 1945.
Right.
But luckily, in neighboring Berlin, a government agency was still keeping the hospital documents of the Great War. So I contacted them, and they said, yeah, they could try and find my grandfather. They needed the name, they needed his date of birth, and then they sent me a document, and with that document, I was able to identify the unit he had served in.
Okay.
He'd been obviously he'd been wounded once or twice, and he was recorded there. And with that, then I set to work and tried to find out as much as I could about the division he served in, the battles this division had been involved in. I was lucky enough to obtain a copy of of the regimental history. I read that, and it was amazing what kind of battles they'd gone through.
Hmm.
And there's another interesting twist of history. The man who wrote this divisional history had the rank of I think, of a captain or a major. And later he was a general and was the commanding officer of my father's division.
Wow. Oh,
It's unbelievable.
yes.
And,
Yeah.
and so as I was able to find more information on the internet because the German government during the war published lists of losses. So for people to go to the local town hall and see whether their loved ones were recorded among the losses.
Right.
So they were categorized as killed, missing in action, slightly wounded, seriously wounded. And in the list of losses, I could find my grandfather 3 times. So he was mentioned there as wounded, slightly wounded in the spring of 1918, apparently during the spring offensive.
Okay.
And then he was mentioned as missing in action in October 1916, Londres. So that stirred my curiosity again. So where is Londres? What happened there?
Mm-hmm.
So and this started to develop some sort of momentum of its own. At the beginning, I only wanted to write a short episode for the family history,
Right,
about the grandfather, but then there was more. So what was done? What happened at the Côte de Châtillon? Why did they fight over this hill for 3 days? What was and then of course a description of the 3-day combat for the Côte de Châtillon was not enough. It had to be embedded into the greater picture, and also a long forgotten passion was revitalized because at university I had loved writing texts. And here there was an opportunity to write something.
yes.
And so I rediscovered the joy and frustration of writing. At the beginning, you have an empty piece of paper that is grinning at you.
Yes.
Come on. What are your ideas? Put them down.
Absolutely. I always tell my daughter when she's struggling to write, like I think I'm pretty sure I heard it from somebody else. I'm not particularly brilliant, so I just take other people's ideas.
And writing is a very creative process. It can be painful, it can be frustrating, but it can be so satisfying.
Yes, and even if you don't know what to do with that empty piece of paper, just start putting words down.
Yeah.
And it may be difficult and awkward at first, but then
Yes.
eventually I always find a flow.
But sometimes ideas start welling up, and you can't write fast enough for all the ideas that want to be squeezed through your pen onto the paper.
Yes. Do you find it writing to be a sort of release? Like once you have it, once you basically transfer it from your mind onto paper, it's like,
Yes, yeah. It can be deeply satisfying.
Yeah.
So, and this occurred, the writing, as I had started, and I put it away for a couple of months, and I started writing, I read it again, and oh, come on, you can't do it like that. So I rewrote chapters, and then the pandemic came, and I had plenty of time.
Right, correct.
And the German military archives had made the sources available. That's another interesting twist of history, because after the Great War, there was an American military commission in Germany, and they copied all the files of the divisions that had fought against the Americans.
Yes.
The copies were preserved in the National Archives in Washington or Maryland. I don't know where exactly they are based.
College Park in Maryland.
The original documents were mostly destroyed in Germany in 1945. So the German archives then received copies from their American colleagues, I think in the 1980s, and then they were digitalized during the pandemic, so they were fully available. So I have full access to all combat reports, orders, and all sorts of material that you need. That was. So I could compare American materials and German materials, and then I had about more than 300 pages, and I thought to myself, well, what are you going to do with that? Either it remains on your hard disk on your computer, or you just let's try and publish it. And then I decided then to publish it, because I gave excerpts to some friends, and they said, it's brilliant. You have to publish this. I was not really convinced at the beginning, because it was pretty doubtful, because the longer you are involved in work just with yourself as the sole respondent, the more doubtful you might become. So you need some sort of feedback from somebody else. And so I gave samples to some of my friends, and they said, "Go ahead, it's good. You must publish this." And then I decided to publish it. It's called in German. We have the same word as in English. It's book on demand. So it's only printed when somebody orders a copy and buys it.
Okay, understood.
So that's also a reason why it is more expensive, because it would be a financial risk to have, say, 1,000 copies printed and store them in your house and sell them piece after piece.
Right.
So
right.
Might have made it cheaper, but there would have been quite a financial risk involved in that. So I opted for the book on demand approach.
Oh, excellent. Excellent. Wow. So we'll get the link to that, and I'll post it in the episode notes so that folks who are interested can
Yeah, thank you.
hopefully purchase a copy. Amazing. Well, Alfons, now that you have Die Vergessene Schlacht written, and that, like we said, that's out now. Do you have any other projects that you're currently working on, or are you just enjoying your permanent holidays?
No. Well, one project is might be a revised edition of the book, because during the pandemic the National Archives are closed in Germany.
Oh, right.
So I might travel to the military archives are in Freiburg in the south of Germany, near the Swiss border. So I might go. Shouldn't say might. I must go there and see whether I can find any map material that I could integrate that had not been digitalized, because maps are sometimes huge, and you need special equipment to digitalize huge maps.
Right. Correct.
So there might be a second edition of the book, and once that has been done, I should really consider translating the book into English. 1 page per day, just to hone my English and train my brain.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic.
Because I noticed that my English is fading away. I use it in the classroom day by day. But since I stopped working in school, I've noticed a steady sort of decline in the standards of my English.
Well, as far as I can tell, like your English is it's frankly it's better than mine. So
oh, come on.
Seriously, I've had no problem understanding you, and it's been absolutely wonderful. Yeah, it's
and of course another project is visiting the Meuse-Argonne region, because I love the landscape. I fell in love with the landscape. The people are so nice.
Yes.
The villages are authentic French farming villages. I mean, it's in a way, you are in the middle of nowhere.
Yes.
And when last time I went to the Côte de Châtillon, it was in the summer. I went there with a friend of mine. We climbed up to the top, so we had to deal with barbed wire fences and all the rest of it, electric wires. And when we returned to the foot of the hill, we sat down on a trunk and we said, "Listen, you can hear the birds chirping, you can hear the leaves rustling in the wind. It's beautiful. There's no noise of civilization whatsoever.
It can be very very quiet out there. Yeah,
it's a very very quiet spot. It's a beautiful area.
It got into me." Particularly in 2018, I visited with my son and my army buddy Chuck, who you will meet later this summer as well. But it's just something about like the rolling hills, the greens and the golds, and in the summer light, and just the fact that the villages you can line up old First World War photographs and completely line up buildings and streets.
Exactly. Yes.
Very much unchanged, and it's like a step back in time. And like you mentioned the people. It's we bring people to Exermont to recreate a very famous photograph of the we call it the running doughboys, and
Oh, is that the photograph of one dead German soldier is lying in the street?
yes, and the tank, and then the Americans are looking at the dead German, and then the next photograph is them midair, like running because the
Yeah,
Germans started shelling Exermont. When we show up there, the locals they see like two three cars pull over and a bunch of people get out. Like we usually have one of the villagers just comes out with the key to the church, and they're like, we
mm,
know why you're here. Go ahead, walk around the church, and when you're done, just lock it up and leave the key on my front step. And
yeah,
it's like, oh God, they're so they're wonderful. It's
yeah, yeah,
so kind and like so readily helpful.
yes.
So
And even as a German, you might expect to be considered an enemy, but there's no hostile feeling anymore. People are friendly, they are welcoming. On one trip, we went to a village called Cornay. That's a bit north of Châtel-Thierry, where
mhm,
the Sergeant York episode occurred.
mhm,
And my grandfather's regiment conducted a successful counterattack there on October the 9th. So that was a critical situation when on the 8th it was the York episode. So there was a danger of the Americans sort of leapfrogging north and pushing into the Argonne forest.
mhm.
So it was important to get them out of the village. So they actually chased them from the village. And in the regimental history of my grandfather's regiment, I found a map of this counterattack, so we could actually follow the counterattack through the village. And somebody saw us doing this, and a lady then came up to us and, "What are you doing here?" So
Yes.
then I explained to her my French is very basic. I explained to her that I was just walking in the footsteps of my grandfather, and she was very cheerful. She said, "Oh, it's so good today that we are friends, that we cooperate in Europe, that we are no longer enemies, and there was no hostile feeling whatsoever."
How wonderful is it to hear that? Gosh, that's my God. In today's world to hear that, it's so refreshing. That's
Yes.
so refreshing. Oh gosh. Alphonse, thank you so very much for coming on the podcast.
Again, I have to say it was a great pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. And gosh, I can't wait till we meet in person over the summer.
Yes.
And
Yeah, I look forward to that very much.
yeah, I think it's going to be a fantastic time.
Mhm.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And I will let you know as soon as we release this and everything. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast again.
Thank you.